Come to order, please. My name is Doug Bowles, a proud board member of Prince George's Heritage and a resident of Colmar Manor, Maryland, formerly Bladensburg. And I have the honor and privilege this afternoon of introducing three wonderful artists who are going to share with you their work. And we'll start with Peter Bryce. Peter is a native of Annapolis, Maryland, and a graduate of the Peabody Conservatory Preparatory Division, and he holds a Bachelor of Arts degree in Irish Traditional Music and Dance from the University of Limerick. Yankee Frolics, his project, is a project by New Century Irish Arts to revive the traditional music of the War of 1812 and to bring a sense of the period's ideals to the American public. Among its members stands a large collection of topical songs from the war, which relate both military actions and their impact on civilian life. These songs were created to convey news and experiences and were sung in a declamatory style that put across their subject matter. These days, this may be a rarefied art form, but in the early 19th century, these songs were widely shared and were a means of sharing and disseminating news of these experiences of heroism and tragedy. Peter says, "They might be analogous to today's news footage, but for our ancestors, I think these songs even forged the kind of mythos that modern people enjoy in, for instance, Star Wars." And at this point, I would do the Wookiee's voice, yes. Right. Being able to put them across 200 years later is a very compelling thing. Peter's playing and singing are masterful, infectious, and filled with joy and inspiration. I spent quite a few lovely minutes last night enjoying his performance at the Millennium Stage, which is available online. And here he is, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Peter Bryce.
There's a portable mic there. If you want the portable mic.
I know. Can you all hear me okay? If I just speak like this.
Speak into that mic. You can take it off of there.
Look, I'm so used to doing it this way. I'll just stand like this. How are you all doing?
Good.
Jeez, it's great to be here. So my name is Peter Bryce, and I suppose many of you are historians and know Maryland pretty well. So I forgot to say this too, but I'm actually, not only am I from Annapolis, but I'm a 12th or 13th generation native of Anne Arundel County. My people, the Bryces, having come here in 1698, we married then into the Howard family. Sarah Howard married John Bryce the first. But this is sort of meaningful for this discussion because my great-great-great-great-grandfather was Nicholas Bryce, and I'm led to understand that he was Samuel Smith's judge advocate at the Battle of Baltimore. I'm led to believe I read it in a book, so I assume that's the case. But anyway, so we've lived in Annapolis all that time, and you'd be familiar with Annapolis's involvement in the Bladensburg races and whatnot. But I'm a musician here, and I sing these what I call traditional songs, by which I mean they're songs from the period of the War of 1812 that my colleagues and I, what we call traditional singers, people who sing songs out of an oral tradition, have taken and sort of reintroduced to that oral tradition through ourselves. Now, I want to make a distinction when I say this between traditional music and folk music. We think of folk music as being sort of the inheritance of all people, or working people in some cases. Traditional music, I would distinguish as being part of a bloodline of style and repertoire. And so in some ways, that's passed down, you see, from master to apprentice. And in the realm of Irish music, I play the button accordion. I can actually trace my teachers and their teachers back to the mid-19th century, which is pretty cool, and in an unbroken oral tradition, nothing on paper. Some of those people, I think, probably couldn't even read and write. So I can, thankfully. But all of it's to say that we have reintroduced these songs into our own repertoire and tried to use the lessons that we learn from singers and musicians to make them sort of whole again in a way that we think they might have been sung at the time, Well, I don't mean to say that. I mean with the vitality that they might have had at the time. Is it the style the same? It's hard to say. So it's not necessarily a reenactment. It's not an attempt to be historical. It's an attempt to be modern people, but with this living history inside of us. And it's a very personal relationship that you end up having, I think, with the songs and with the people. But I'll sing one for you if you like.
Indeed.
Sure. So this is a song called Yankee Frolics, actually, and it's why we named the project Yankee Frolics, after all. It discusses a few of the naval actions, the important naval actions, well, victories, let's say, actually, in the War of 1812, and at last, I don't know, would you say, the pillaging of Toronto, which, was then York. So it goes like this. Oh, I set it to this air called Nakanavan Vona that was collected by Seamus Ennis in the 1960s in Carna in Ireland. But it's important because it's in 9/8, which we call a slip jig. The poetry of the song is in 9/8. You see, so there weren't a flood of airs like this. I found out later that the tune that they used was called Mall Row for this song, which I think is an air that goes da dum dee dum dee dum dee dee dum 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 dee dee dum. Right, the first and the second part. But I like this other air better, so I just use this one. But honestly, like that's fairly common. It's artistic license or something like that. So anyway, this goes, no more of your blathering nonsense about the Nelsons of old Johnny Bull. I assume you all know who John Bull is, by the way. You're historians. Okay, all right. Oh, the Nelsons of old Johnny Bull. I'll sing you a song by my conscience about Jones and Decatur and Hull. Dad Neptune had long with vexation beheld with what insolent pride that turbulent billow-washed nation had aimed to control the salt tide. Sing lather away, gentle and easy, my soul, by the game hob or knob. In a very few minutes we'll please you, because we take work by the job. John Bull, for vaunting and boasting his equal, you'll seldom come near. But brave Hull, betwixt smoking and roasting, dispatched his proud Guerriere. To him the loss was a wonder, which made his proud spirit to choke. And when to the bottom our thunder had sent her, we laughed at the joke. Sing lather away, gentle and easy, my soul, by the game hob or knob. In a very few minutes we'll please you, because we take work by the job. The other day, worse than gout fit or colic, the Wasp, Rogers, Biddle, and Jones so terrible stung the poor Frolic, she left her but bearskin and bones. So she struck, what could she do better? For time there was none to delay. Indeed, it must terribly fret her to see she could not run away. Sing lather away, gentle and easy, my soul, by the game hob or knob. In a very few minutes we'll please you, because we take work by the job. Now to augment our brave little navy and add to the strength of each state, Decatur without sauce or gravy has dressed Alexander the Great. By my soul, to prevent further trouble and save a disgraceful downfall, since they'll find all resistance a bubble, they'll strike without fighting at all. Sing lather away, gentle and easy, my soul, by the game hob or knob. In a very few minutes we'll please you, because we take work by the job. And again has our brave Constitution, whose Guerriere job you on cord, sent the Java to sound the deep ocean, after trimming her slick by the board. Though Lambert for nearly 2 hours resisted the Yankees' attack, still the flag of St. George at length cowers, and our stars and our stripes mount the wreck. Sing lather away, gentle and easy, my soul, by the game hob or knob. In a very few minutes we'll please you, because we take work by the job. And fifth comes the brave little hornet, who met with a peacock so gay, but the Yankees make bold e'en to scorn it, and clips his proud plumage away. In a short half-glass they were crippled, the pea chickens fluttered about her peak. Being struck and hell-riddled, she let her Union Jack down, sing lather away, gentle and easy, my soul, by the game, hob or nob. In a very few minutes we'll please you, because we take work by the job. To complete this half of a dozen, Chauncey, Dearborn, and Pike took a trip with 3,000 men, well picked and chosen to mix for the English their flip. To York they arrived in good season, where Sheaf made a bonny retreat, and the Yankees then taught them a lesson not to stop, make good use of their feet, sing lather away, gentle and easy, my soul, by the game, hob or nob. In a very few minutes we'll please you, because we take work by the job. So here's to the lads of our Navy, Lawrence, Bainbridge, Decatur, Jones Hall, when they either dispatch to old Davy or bring home the ships of John Bull. And may Congress, each hero's protector, reward all the deeds of the brave, and Britain may e'er find us victors in contests on land or the wave. Sing lather away, gentle and easy, my soul, by the game, hob or nob. In a very few minutes we'll please you, because we take work by the job. Sing lather away, gentle and easy, Colombians all play hob or nob. In a very few minutes we'll please you, we're getting so used to the job. Is that? Thanks. Thanks very much. So the thing about them is they're fairly long songs, you know, and they do require a little bit of memorization beforehand.
Do you have your accordion?
I don't. I didn't bring it because I was afraid if there were any purists here, someone might bring up the fact that the accordion wasn't invented during the War of 1812. But I have taken some of the melodies that I've learned in a book called Riley's Flute Melodies, which was published for marching bands and whatnot. And I've played them on the accordion in this more Irish style. Because to be honest, I suppose one of the reasons why I started doing this was I was sort of upset that as an American learning Irish music, I didn't feel like we had the equivalent of some of these really sort of heavy topical songs that they have in Ireland and England too, and Scotland, and even our national music, airs like Hail Columbia, you know, we kind of play them like dirges. So I was thinking, why would you want to invest in our patriotic music as a young person if like you couldn't get behind the sort of excitement of it? And then I started learning about these songs from the War of 1812 and realized that getting behind the excitement of them was nothing short of bloodlust, because they're pretty sanguine songs. And I'll sing a little bit of one if you like. I think I can only sing one all the way through, which is what I just did. Otherwise, I will slowly move into 40 and 50 minutes. And singing with my eyes closed, you might never stop me. But this one goes, it's called Charge the Can Cheerily. Have you ever heard of this one? It was more in the vein of art music, I suppose, at the time, written after the death of Lawrence, as you'll see. But I'll sing two verses here. It goes, now coil up your nonsense about England's great navy, and take in your slack about hog-hearted tars, for frigates as stout and as gallant crews have we, or how came her Macedon decked with our stars? Yes, how came her Guerriere, her peacock and Java, all sent broken rib to old Davy of late. How came they? Why, split me, we're braver than Britons, and that's what we'll give them whenever we meet. So charge the can cheerily, send it round merrily. Here's to our country and captains commanding, to all who inherit of Lawrence the Spirit, disdaining to strike while a stick is left standing. Now if unaware we should run a fresh gale in close in with a squadron, we'd laugh at them all. We'd tip Master Bull such a sample of sailing as would cause him to fret like a pig in a squall. We'll show that vain boaster of numbers superior, though he and his slaves at the notion may sneer, and in skill as in courage to us they're inferior. The longer they chase us, the less we've to fear. So charge the can cheerily, send it round merrily. Here's to our country and captains commanding, to all who inherit of Lawrence the Spirit, disdaining to strike while a stick is left standing. And it goes on and becomes, increasingly complex. Thank you very much. So I would say, for us, myself and Lisa Null, who's a great traditional singer, and Judy Cook, who are the three singers primarily involved in the project, and Greg Adams also, who's an ethnomusicologist and a great banjo player who studies the banjo in the 19th century. The question is, how do you relate these songs to modern people? And I think, if nothing else, because we keep getting more modern, farther away from the War of 1812, that's a very difficult question to answer, and it keeps changing. And I'll relate one of my experiences to you. Here, I was singing a version of Yankee Doodle, which was very popular to one of my students. I teach a few singers. And he laughed. He thought it was the daftest thing that anybody would be into Yankee Doodle, which brought a tear to my eye a little bit, But I related the poetry to him, and I explained to him the allusions and the sort of the historical basis for this song. Well, I'll sing a little bit of it for you, this version of Yankee Doodle from the War of 1812, if you fancy. Otherwise, I'll just keep talking. Yeah, all right, okay. Yeah, okay, I'll keep singing. So, Yankee Doodle, this would have been a really popular era at the time, and what they used to do is they'd print a poem in a book. Printers would print, not they, like anyone at the time, penguins or whoever had access. You know what I mean? So they'd print it. They'd say to the air, thank you, to the air of Yankee Doodle, or to the tune of Yankee Doodle, or to the tune of the Flying Fame, or whatever else. These would be in newspapers, chapbooks, or on broadsheets. So this one again is particularly sanguine. You gallant sons of liberty, who bravely have defended your country's laws by land and sea, and to her cause attended. Yankee Doodle is the tune Americans delight in. It will do to whistle, sing, and play, and it's just the thing for fighting. All on the ocean's wide domain, our towers are firm and true, sirs, and freedom's cause they will maintain with Yankee Doodle do. Sirs, Yankee Doodle is the tune Americans delight in. It will do to whistle, sing, and play, and it's just the thing for fighting. Those British tars think they can beat Yankees 1-2, sirs, but only give us man to man, they'll see what we can do. Sirs, Yankee Doodle is the tune Americans delight delight in. It will do to whistle, sing, and play, and's just the thing for fighting. The 4th day of July, 'tis said, the day does Britain rue, sirs, when an independent tune we played called Yankee Doodle Doo. Sirs, Yankee Doodle is the tune Americans delight in. It will do to whistle, sing, and play, and's just the thing for fighting. Columbia's sons did then declare they would be independent, and for King George they wouldn't care, nor yet for his descendants. Yankee Doodle is the tune Americans delight in. It will do to whistle, sing, and play, and's just the thing for fighting. So, thanks. So I spent a while explaining to him, of course, that Columbia was this figurative name for America, in the way that so many countries in those days had figurative names that would have been passed along in the poetry of the time, which was pretty good. Like the poetry in these songs, I think you'll admit, it's not at a third grade level. It's not like baby, John Bull, baby. It's not that kind of thing. So for me and for us anyway, just as I am now, being able to present these songs requires a level of detail, that most performance won't sustain, because you really do have to talk about them. But ultimately, even though the performance is it's a really crucial aspect of being able to put these songs across, what I am investing in is being able to show these songs to other people in the hope that they'll be interested in learning them, either from me or from Lisa or Judy or even on your own through a book. Because my experience with them has been that taking them into myself and learning about the people whose lives they explain, it changed me. And it has changed the people around me too, because their stories, as I said, are written on my heart, And I don't mean to be soft or touchy-feely about it, but it's a cool thing, I think, to be able to take that in from so long ago. I'm sure, as it is for all of you, being students of history and more than students, professors and kings, emperors even of history in the academic sense. So anyway, everybody, thank you very much for your time, and enjoy the rest of the day here.
Thanks. Next up is Joanna Campbell Blake, who is a native of Mobile, Alabama, and a figurative sculptor here in Washington, D.C. She graduated from Auburn in 1999 with a Bachelor of Fine Arts. Since 2001, she has worked for Caskey Studio Incorporated, where she has contributed her design and sculpting skills to the creation of a number of large-scale public monuments, most notably the World War II Memorial in D.C. and the Schermerhorn Symphony Center in Nashville, Tennessee. Truly stunning work. In collaboration with Gary Wagoner, she has created numerous terracotta works for the Auburn campus, and recently she completed an 10-foot bronze sculpture to commemorate the 200th anniversary of the Battle of Bladensburg in the War of 1812, which stands in Balloon Park at the Peace Cross Junction, a welcome and powerful addition to our community, and as a resident, I thank you for that. She also contributed 2 relief panels to honor slaves buried at the Contraband and Freedmen's Cemetery Memorial in Alexandria, Virginia. She has worked with Davis Buckley Architects, who have done preservation work on marvelous treasures such as Decatur House Museum and President Monroe House, also known as the Arts Club of Washington. And her design with Davis Buckley for the Virginia Women's Monument was selected as a finalist in the design competition for a monument to be located on Richmond's Capitol grounds, this is a mouthful, commemorating the struggles and accomplishments of Virginia women throughout the state's history. Joanna is consistently guided by extensive research and thorough study on her subject matter. Her work is influenced by the power of historical figures and events while drawing from the social, historical, and physical context of the site. Let's all welcome Joanna.
Thank you, everybody. And that, I don't know where he went, but that singing was amazing. What a treat. Thank you.
I'm here. I don't want you to
No, that's a tough act to follow, and I don't, this sort of thing makes me a little nervous because I don't usually do public speaking. I prefer instead to communicate through art. And because all art in a way is a form of storytelling, and it's the artist conveying their ideas to the viewer. But monumental art making is a little bit different because it might be my work, but it's not my story. So this story is really about all of us as Americans and as residents of Prince George's County. So it was quite an honor to have been entrusted with telling the story. And this is kind of all where it starts right here. It's the Bladensburg Balloon Park as it looked in 2009 when the AIM and Trust first approached me about this project. And one of the things that we did early on was we went to Baltimore, and these are their monuments to the War of 1812. I don't have to tell you guys, since you're historians, that things turned out quite differently in Baltimore than they did at Bladensburg. And so these towering, the one on the left is actually the Francis Scott Key monument with this towering gilded figure, it's very triumphant, which was not the feeling that we were going for in Bladensburg. So that was kind of the challenge for me from the beginning, was how do you commemorate a defeat, essentially? How do you tell the story of a defeat? And I tried to do that through the architecture and the artwork in a couple of ways. And the basic idea, the biggest thing I think that conveys that is that the design, the overall architecture is more closely related to a mausoleum than, a triumphal arch. So the basic shape of it is kind of like a mausoleum. And then the second way is through the artwork. And I've had the experience of working on a lot of relief sculpture, and I just really feel like it has this beautiful narrative quality for storytelling. And so I thought that would be a way to really tell the story into, so, people are driving by on Bladensburg on their way to Washington, and they see this thing, and what can you tell people from their car? Like, can they get a sense of the story just at a glance? So the idea was to present Commodore Joshua Barney, and another way that you sort of hint at defeat is that he's not in this sort of moment where he's charging at the British or counterattacking, but he's been wounded, so you get a sense that maybe this wasn't a great day for Joshua Barney anyway. And so this is kind of where it started, with just a little sketch, and then I did a model, a maquette. It's kind of a sketch in clay. It's at 1 inch to the foot scale. Then we did this so things tend to shrink when you take them outside. Artwork can seem so huge when it's in your studio. 8 foot by 10 foot seems so big, but when you take it outside, it really shrinks. And so we just wanted to know, how is this going to look from the site? How is it going to read from the street? And so this was early on, and that's my daughter, who wasn't around at the time we started the project. And it's this project has sort of been the backdrop of her childhood, and it's also like a visual reminder for me for how long this took us. Yeah. So anyway, did I say already that the AIM and Trust was the sponsor of the project, and they do historical preservation in the area, and not just Bladensburg, but they've preserved a lot of historic sites. So this is what it looked like, our little mock-up, to sort of see it from the street. So, bigger would be better, but we kind of felt like it can't be any smaller, and let's start raising some money. So, and Parks and Planning was kind enough to agree to let us use the site, because if you were in Bladensburg before, if you were standing at the area of the Peace Cross, there were monuments to, the Peace Cross is a monument to World War I, and then there were monuments to Korea and World War II and Vietnam and 9/11, but there was really nothing in Bladensburg. There were no monuments in Bladensburg that would let anybody know that this major American event happened, American history event happened there. So anyway, somebody early on, I think it was probably John Sauer, put me in touch with Richard Irvin, who spoke earlier today. I really hate that I missed his talk, but yeah, he was amazing in answering so many email questions, probably several hundred that were just about cannons. So trying to get all of the details right for that, he was really helpful in my research. And also, I went to Fort McHenry and met some reenactors And they were essentially, they were the reason that I think one of the big reasons that the project was successful is that they had all of the right gear, and they were just amazing models and really got into it. The guy on the left is Myron Peterson. He sings with Ship's Company, if you are familiar with that group. He posed for the wounded Commodore Barney. And then the guy next to him is Gunnery Sergeant Tom Williams with the U.S. Marine Corps, and he's with the Historical Division in Quantico. And he's not a specific individual, but he just represents all of the Marines that were there with Barney. And then that's me with the, what's that gun again? That awesome rifle. Anyway, it's kind of fun.
Is that Springfield?
Or is it musket?
Anyway, and then
Rifle, yeah.
Robert Stewart posed for Charles Ball. And when I met him at Defender's Day at Fort McHenry, he was actually working for the National Park Service. And when I asked him if he would be my Charles Ball, he knew exactly who I was talking about. And all of these guys actually got to come back for the dedication that was, I guess, a little over a month ago. So we tried a bunch of different poses with the idea that Joshua Barney would be in the front, and we're trying to figure out the extent to which he would be wounded. There were some where he was kind of just draped across their shoulders, and some people were like, well, he just looks like he's drunk, and I got all, which might have also been true, I don't know. Get your courage up. But anyway, the slide on the top left is what was kind of the final pose, and then from that I went through that same process again of making a drawing, and then the sculpture on the left is again at an inch to the foot maquette, just trying to work out how the relief would look. You would almost never go just to the full 8x10 without having worked these things out beforehand. So that's a little Photoshop. It turned on the right of the small maquette that's only about a foot tall, and it turned out that we couldn't put it on top of the mound, which would have been a great spot, but there's a drainage ditch that runs underneath there, and it wouldn't have supported the weight of the limestone and the bronze. So I think it's in a great spot now. And also, Balloon Park, for those of you that don't know, if you are looking at it from an aerial view, then it actually looks like a balloon, but you would need to be in a hot air balloon to get that, or an airplane or something. Google Maps, you can check it out. But we actually preserved that. The compromise was to put the monument in the center of that cement pad that was already there, and so the monument's essentially in the basket of the hot air balloon. So then I did a quarter scale model, which the work was enlarged from. So this just sort of shows some of the steps in the studio of that work, trying to get all of the details in at this quarter scale. And then this is the quarter scale with a little faux patina on it. And this thing, I think, lived for about 2 years in John Gianetti's trunk, because he went everywhere trying to raise money for this, and he would, I don't know, bring people out to his car and say, look at this, give us some money. But anyway, this was sort of like how people get an idea of what we were trying to do and to get folks to sign on to the project. And I think it was a pretty successful example of a public-private partnership that way. So this photograph shows the piece. I had the figures digitally enlarged, so they're actually in big hunks of foam as the armature for the piece. The background is just plywood. And then the technology is it's milled below the surface, like 1/8 of an inch, so that you have room to put the clay on top of it. So that's sort of the amount of detail that you would get from that milling technology. That's the styrofoam just painted the color of the clay. There's my little helper there in the bottom. She's like on an iPad over there right now, but she'll tell you that she helped sculpt it. Oh, there she is. Yeah, she's my assistant.
She's helping.
Yeah, right. This was, so I didn't put the arm, some people were like, why are the arm and the leg missing? But while I was working, it would have been impossible to get to those points. It would have, or like made it more difficult to work on the pieces on the back if the arm and the leg were there. So it just made more sense to sort of work from the background forward. And then this is the finished clay in the studio. And so the work was actually cast in Chester, Pennsylvania by Loran Bronze, who did all of the, or a lot of the bronze work at the National World War II Memorial. And they do amazing work at that foundry. So this is them. My studio wouldn't really have been large enough to work on this full-size piece, so the Gianetti Studios let me use their space. And also I have steps up to my studio, so that would have made it more difficult. But then when the foundry came, they were like, there is a garage bay in the front, but they were like, no, we'll just go over the railing and lower it down. And I was like, what? It was pretty scary, but the photo on the left shows the piece being lowered down from the first floor to the ground floor on the back level, and then loaded up. And they had to cut the arm and the leg off before they transported it.
It cost an arm and a leg, too.
No, right, that's what John likes to tell people. So this is basically the steps for lost wax bronze casting, if you're familiar with that. But a lot of people ask me, so then they say, so then it's bronze, like they have this idea that it's like baby shoes and it's just dipped in metal, but the process is actually, I don't know, some of you guys might know this, maybe like 5,000 years ago by the ancient Chinese. And it's essentially the same process. You start with a wax positive, you make a ceramic thing around it, because there's no metal that you could pour molten metal into that wouldn't melt, right? So they figured out early on that if you had a ceramic vessel, that you could pour the molten metal into it and then break the ceramic thing off of it afterwards. So this is kind of that process. They made a huge rubber mold on the piece. They removed some of the pieces that were projecting off the surfaces, like the heads and the arms. It's sort of scary looking. And then they made plaster mother molds on that. And this image shows all of those pieces. It's kind of like making a huge three-dimensional jigsaw puzzle, but they paint the wax into the surface at the thickness that they want the finished bronze to be. So this is an example. They just have some like soft foam in there to stop it from collapsing, but this is the wax. And then you come back and do a wax inspection and make sure. But you can see here that all of the details, my tool marks, are visible in the wax, and that translates into the finished bronze. So then those pieces are dipped in that ceramic material that I was talking about. They add these funnels and sprues to them that are also made of wax to allow the hot air to escape as the molten bronze is being poured in, and the funnels act, well, like funnels. So this is an image of the bronze being poured at the foundry. They're all leathered up. And they bury those pieces, those ceramic pieces, in sand just in case from the heat, if any of them cracks, then the bronze doesn't run out onto the floor, onto your feet. So if you're going to have an addition of, maybe you're doing a portrait bust and you're going to have 50 heads, then you would need to have 50 wax positives and 50 ceramic shells and pour 50 of them that way. So the next step is to let these pieces cool down and pull them out of the sand. And then you bust that ceramic shell off of it and you're left with the bronze positive of the piece. And then it has to be, I got a little laser pointer here, right? Yeah, look at that. Then the piece has to be welded back together. So all of these shiny spots right here are places where the artwork has been welded back together. It was made in so many small pieces. And these guys are amazing at, so once they weld it back together, then they can chase the welds and put those textures back into it. I actually like the texture in the artwork that's kind of evidence of the artist's hand at work. You know, it's not perfect and smooth and machined looking. And the foundry, they love me for that. They really have to go back and put all those little hash marks and scratch marks back into the surface. So this was doing a metal inspection before the patina was put on. Bronze is 95% copper, and so over time it'll get that green patina on it, kind of like an old penny. since there's so much copper in it. But you can accelerate that process with different chemicals and acids and heat. So they put a patina on the piece. This was the groundbreaking ceremony that we had. This is Ed Day on the left, and John Sauer and John Giannetti and his son. And then this is, in the blue hard hat, is Lynn Gully. She's the landscape architect with Maryland National Capital Parks and Planning, who did an amazing job transforming the site on the small budget that they had to sort of change the site from its current use for this project. And Dick Charlton, who's the treasurer of the Amen Trust. So we were all really excited. These things were starting to happen at the site. And then this was when the limestone had gone in, then the bronze went in, and then they fitted the limestone to the piece. So that was fun to watch that go in with a crane. And these are the guys from the foundry and the guys from Pagliaro Stone who were doing the stonework. This is the inscription and carved on the top. It was actually originally the inscription that we had on there. I can't remember if it was on the original drawing, but it said "Undaunted in defeat." And really, I mean, that's more honest, right? But nobody liked that. That was a really hard sell. Nobody liked that. They're just kind of, so undaunted in battle. So. Yeah, and then one of these logos sort of adopted that undaunted theme. So this was the dedication. They talked to the fire department about sort of doing some traffic control there, and they had the idea of putting a big flag above the monument for the dedication. And then here are the models. They got to come back for the dedication. Actually, Robert was at the dedication with a lot of members of his extended family, some of whom had come all the way from Trinidad. And an interesting story about that is that a lot of his descendants actually fought for the British at Bladensburg, and that's how they wound up in Trinidad. So I don't know, it kind of gives me chills. It's really awesome. I don't know why that one's upside down, or why it just did not. Weird. It wasn't previewing like this, but anyway, there's John Giannetti, who's on the front row here, and I just have to say that like this project has been his baby, and it would not have happened without his. Well, I asked somebody earlier. I was like, "Does relentless enthusiasm sound like a pejorative term? Does that sound mean? Relentless enthusiasm, because that's what it took." For all of the fundraising, and it was hard to, John would be so enthusiastic about it and called everybody multiple times and really helped push this project through to make it happen. So congratulations to you too. And then this was after the wreath laying ceremony there at the site. So I guess that's about all I have, unless you have any questions, or do questions come later? Okay, great, thanks.
Thank you, Joanna. Our final artist for today is Mr. Mark Hildebrand, who is Executive Director of Make Your Mark Media, a Maryland-based nonprofit film company dedicated to producing, fostering, and promoting media projects that create awareness for social, educational, and environmental issues. In addition to directing and producing the independent film Anthem, Mark has created short films for the National Park Service and the Bladensburg Waterfront Visitor Center. Mark's films have been featured widely, including Maryland Public Television. And I can say that my nephew is a huge fan of your work, as he has watched your film at the Bladensburg Water Park about 75 times. I think he has it memorized. So you have a 6-year-old fan in Hyattsville, that's for sure. A few more viewings and he'll have that memorized. So Mark is currently working on 2 major projects: the Anthem Project, which is an online resource for Maryland teachers and students with lesson plans and activities based on video segments from Anthem. It's a very impressive project. I'm proud to say that I took the quiz last night and I scored 100%, so I'm allowed to continue living in Bladensburg, which is nice. And Brookville, United States Capitol for a Day, is his documentary about the Quaker town in Maryland that sheltered President Madison while the British occupied Washington, D.C. in August of 1814. Mark Hildebrand.
So I'm going to talk a little bit, but most of my presentation is in the audiovisual nature. Yes, I am, sorry. So as you've heard and seen today, there are very many ways to tell a story. There are professional storytellers out there that tell stories. Comedians, stand-up comics, I think, are storytellers in a way. So are historians. But telling that story and making it interesting and making it fun for general audiences, which are the ones that we really want to reach, it can be difficult. It can be a challenge. So I'm a filmmaker, and film is a fantastic way to reach a broad audience. You really don't have to do anything. Once you've made it, you put it out there, and people can watch it or not watch it, enjoy it or not enjoy it. I created a documentary called Anthem that has been on public television for the last couple of years, combining music and telling the story of the music of the War of 1812 and the musical background behind our national anthem. By now, you've heard this story a zillion times, right? You've all heard the story about the Anacreontic tune, the drinking song that our national anthem is based on. Can you all sing it? To Anacreon in heaven, where he sat in full glee, a few sons of blah, 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 blah. Okay, so you've heard that a zillion times. So I prefer to call it a club song, and we tell that story in our film. But in making the film, we, being also from Annapolis, Annapolis has the honor of having St. John's College, which is where Francis Scott Key went to school for 7 years. And we wanted to involve St. John's College on a couple of levels. Number one, they teach Greek there, and Anacreon was a Greek poet. So we got one of the tutors to tell us who Anacreon was and explain the background of this great poet. But we also have the actual building that Francis Scott Key studied in, McDowell Hall, which is still standing in St. John's College. So I really wanted the St. John's College chorus to sing the Anacreontic song as part of our film. So I approached Peter Kalkavage, who's the director of the chorus, and I said, you have any interest in singing this song? He said, well, it's kind of a basic song. You know, we do stuff a little loftier, Bach and that kind of stuff. And I said, well, did you know that there is a 3-part harmony version of the Anacreontic song that was written by the guy that created the melody? He said, no, that sounds interesting. So I told him a little bit about it. And what I'd like to show you is one of the special features on our DVDs that involves the St. John's College Chorus, who now call themselves the Sons of Harmony. And this will tell you a little bit about it.
The third president of the Anacreontic Society was Rafe Tomlinson. Not much is known about him today, beyond that he was an attorney and was elected president of the society in early 1776. We do not know when he wrote the words to the Anacreontic song, or when he commissioned John Stafford Smith to write the music. But by the autumn of 1776, the song had become popular, and Tomlinson increased the membership of the society to 40, plus guests. His term as president was cut short suddenly in March of 1778, when he died of unknown causes, a bachelor at the age of 33. The earliest known printing of the words was in August of 1778. We find the sheet music printed 1 or more years later, with some of the words altered to reflect the society's move to the Crown and Anchor in the Strand. As its popularity increased, there were additional printings through 1790 and perhaps more, but none of these printings credited Smith as composer. He wrote the melody as a teenager and may have sold or given the rights to Tomlinson. Almost 20 years later, in 1798, John Stafford Smith published a new version in 3-part harmony.
To an Agron in heaven, where he sat in full glee, where he sat in full glee. A few sons of harmony, a few sons of harmony, a few sons of harmony sent up a petition that he their inspirer and matron would be, and matron would be.
8 takes of it. And the first time they did it in a dirge, almost. They did it very slow and very majestically. And I said, guys, come on. This is a fun, bouncy, upbeat song. And then they went crazy. So it was a lot of fun. So telling the story in another way, last year, Mike Arnold approached me about doing several short films about Bladensburg. And to talk about Bladensburg, not about the Battle of Bladensburg. I was like, great, because I had just done a film on the Battle of Bladensburg in the Visitor Center. So what I'd like to show you is another way to try and take the history that we know, images that we have, live action and other formats, and throw in a little bit of music and make it an interesting story. So here is a 3-minute film about Bostwick.
Did you know that Bladensburg was once an important Crown Colony tobacco port, where ocean-going ships stopped to pick up and deliver goods?
Tobacco was grown and harvested largely with slave labor in the land surrounding Bladensburg. It was then brought here to be weighed, graded, stored, and shipped to other colonial ports, and ultimately England.
In 1747, only 5 years after its founding, Bladensburg became one of Prince George's County's official tobacco inspection stations.
One of its most notable merchants and citizens was Christopher Lowndes, and this fine home was built by him.
A merchant, shipyard and rope walk owner, building contractor, postmaster, and commissioner of the town, Lowndes completed his home, Bostwick, in 1746.
Built on the promontory, now known as Lowndes Hill, Bostwick provided a good view of the ships arriving at the waterfront and easy access to his shipbuilding and rope-making businesses.
Bostwick's design may have been influenced by Bel Air Mansion, built between 1745 and 1747, for Samuel Ogle, the provincial governor of Maryland.
Bel Air was also the home of Lowndes' future wife, Elizabeth Tasker.
Bostwick remained in the Lowndes family after his death in 1785, and that of his wife in 1789.
Lowndes' daughter, Rebecca, and her husband, Benjamin Stoddard, gained ownership in 1799.
Stoddard was appointed the first Secretary of the Navy by President John Adams in 1798. He and Rebecca divided their time between Bostwick and Halcyon House in Georgetown.
Stoddard made several modifications to accommodate his family and continued in the house after Rebecca's untimely death in 1802.
As Bladensburg changed, so did Bostwick, with porches and dormers added by subsequent owners.
This grand house still stands as a reminder of Bladensburg's heyday as a port town.
So you like the seagulls and the wagon sounds when you see the diorama? It really changes it. So, okay, that's history, and it's still a little dry. One of the reasons, and also I have to mention that there were 2 generations of Arnolds narrating that, Mike and his son. So, one of the best things about being a filmmaker is to try and give back what's happened to me a number of times, and that is, I love it when you can see a movie or a TV show and you're thoroughly entertained. It's got action, romance, all that sort of stuff, but you walk out of there learning something about history or about science, and then perhaps piquing an interest so that you would want to go and learn more about it and get into the history books and do the research online and stuff. So what I'm going to show you next, I want you to bear with me. This is about 6.5 minutes long, so It won't kill you. This is something that I wrote and directed a few years back. Part of this project was filmed on Creveling's property, the Mount Calvert historic site. We did a little filming there. And it's an attempt to combine some of my passions. I've combined music and history, which I both love very much. There's one more passion that's been very strong in my life that I combined in this little effort. So this is an excerpt of an 85-minute film, but I'm only showing you 6.5 minutes of it.
Ship's log, stardate 4847.4. First Officer Tackett reporting. Captain Carter and the landing party have been missing for over 1 hour. Extensive scans of the planet's surface have come up empty. The Solonite Council has offered an explanation as well as their assistance. The Solonite have new technology that can record images and sounds from the past, and apparently is not limited by distance. I'm not sure I trust them, but without their help it could take precious time to find our shipmates.
How is he, Doc?
Well, he'll have to avoid spicy food for a few weeks, but he'll live. That is, if we can get him back to the ship before too long. This isn't a very sanitary environment, and he's still in danger of infection.
I'll see what I can do.
Attention!
Oh my God.
What are they doing here?
My apologies, Excellency. Colonel Glover did not know where else to put them. He thought it wiser to keep them separate from...
Fine. I suppose it was too much to ask for a moment's peace. You speak English?
I do, sir.
Not the King's English. I can't say I like your tailor.
At ease, Ensign. Condition amber.
Aye, sir. Anybody get the idea of that transport?
Now you just close your eyes and get some natural sleep here.
Aye.
Condition amber.
Basically, the situation isn't under control, but there's nothing he can do about it.
That about covers it.
Speaking of our situation, sir, where in Pennsylvania do you believe we are?
You mean when? The General's aide mentioned a skirmish on the other side of the river.
And the General stated that General Howe wasn't pursuing.
I think it's early in the war. As I remember, the Colonials didn't get off to a very good start. There's something about the river that plays a major event in history.
General, sir!
I trust you slept well, Captain?
We slept very well, thank you, sir. And you?
I don't have that particular luxury right now. Soon enough.
May I ask you a few questions?
If you came to observe the Continental Army, I'm afraid you may have traveled a great distance for nothing. There won't be any army in a few weeks.
But, General, you said the British weren't advancing.
They don't have to move a muscle. Most of these boys joined the army after the success in Boston. Now, the thrill is worn off. They are cold, beaten, and tired. At the end of the month, their enlistments will run out, and they will simply pack up and go home. I wish that I could do the same.
But your cause, independence.
We actually thought that we could defeat a trained European army. These boys had enthusiasm. I'll give them that. And we can certainly outrun them in our own backyard. But it is another thing when every day brings a new disaster. We thought we had outrun them and could regroup. And then, strange people start showing up.
I realize that we appear strange, but please don't think that we're here to interfere in any way.
Tell that to the devil, Captain. He'll be joining us shortly.
The devil?
The Jersey Devil. I saw him with my own eyes. Excellency, must we bring him in here?
He's not the only one who's scared out of his wits, Captain. Half my army spent the night on their knees praying. They say he appeared in a plume of fire. What next?
Captain?
Excuse me, sir. Yes, Doctor, what is it?
Did he say devil?
The Jersey Devil. New Jersey. I remember. The Delaware.
Pardon me, sir, but I remember the Alamo. So what?
The Delaware River. The crossing the Delaware River and the surprise attack on Trenton.
It turns everything around.
My folks never helped with my history homework, so I'm a little vague on this. I do remember the painting, though.
On Christmas night in,
1776.
Right. A few months after the Declaration of Independence, the Army had lost several battles and was barely hanging on. Washington decided to try a surprise attack on a group of German mercenaries.
Hessians. I'm impressed, mon capitaine.
I assume they were or will be successful?
They took the battalion to Trenton with only a few minor casualties. With a much-needed victory and fresh supplies, it galvanized the revolutionary cause. Re-enlistment surged, and they continued fighting for another 5 years.
All because that man, standing by the fire, came up with a brilliant plan and was able to convince his commanders and generals to take a leap of faith.
That man standing by the fire is beaten, sir. And it looks like our untimely arrival was the last straw.
I have a question about fundraising, and my question is for Mark, the cost of Anthem, the fundraising that was done, and then also the gentleman in the very front who fundraised for the memorial, what that cost and how you went about fundraising.
Well, Anthem is a sort of a lucky story. We started the project with no money. We raised money from our friends and from our family. We got a little bit of money from the Maryland National Capital Park and Planning Commission, which was a great help, and they've got the big credit at the beginning of the film. We went to Maryland, we went to a whole bunch of different entities to try and get grants, and they all looked at us like we were crazy because they'd never heard of us before. So we did do a crowdfunding campaign on Kickstarter, and we're able to raise a little bit more money that way. To date, the film is still not paid for. We're only a little bit in the red, but it's taken since we released the film in December of 2012 for us to make back a little bit of that money. And a large part of that is actually through the Anthem Project, which is our website for teachers, because we were able to get a grant for that because it was an educational program. And we were able to use some of the funds from that to pay Anthem for its intellectual property to use these video segments in these lesson plans. So, did you want to?
And she also wanted to know from Mr. Giannetti about funding for the memorial, how you raised it?
Yeah. Well, we started out without any money either. Well, the Amen Trust is a nonprofit organization, and we sort of were trying to think of a project that would we could participate in for the bicentennial, the War of 1812. We came up with the idea of let's create a monument. That was very easy to come up with an idea. The next step was, how are we going to pay for it? Who's going to do it? How we do it? And I don't know how many of you have been by the Peace Cross and looked at that monument and thought to yourself, who were the people that built that thing? I mean, it's a substantial monument. How did they do that? And that was always on my mind. And when we had realized that we had to go out and try to collect money, I remember going to a number of people. Everybody seemed to like the idea. So we went to one of these big real estate developers, and I said that very thing. I said, how many times have you gone by the Peace Cross and wondered, how did that get there? Who put that there? And it turns out it's people just like us. And this gentleman was so intensely enthusiastic about it, he pulled out his checkbook and wrote a $10,000 check right off the bat. I almost fell out of my chair. So the whole idea is if you've got to get something that people seem to relate it to what you want to do, and we kept going, and the reaction everywhere we went. Of course, we applied for grants at the state level and various other grants, and we had people, this was more than a one-man project, it was a whole committee, and we had people that were very good at filling out forms and asking for money from various nonprofit organizations, and that's how we started. But we raised about $350,000, and just for your own information, our treasurer back here is Dick Charlton, who was with us the whole way. We got our last bill for $34,000, and we only have $15,000. So we're going to have to figure out how to raise the rest of the money. So the thing is, it's a constant, you count on certain expenses, but it always turns out to be a little bit more. And I'm very confident that we'll be able to raise the rest of the money that we have. But thanks to Park and Planning and the Joint Task Force for the Bicentennial, everybody pitched in, and that's how we raised the money.
Did that make any sense? Perfect sense, John.
I have a question first for Joanna. I was wondering, before the sculpture was cast, how did they know where exactly to make the cuts in order to unassemble the sculpture by pieces so that they can cast it in individual pieces?
I don't know. I don't quite know the answer to that. I mean, it's not entirely mysterious. When the ancient Greeks were casting things in bronze, they didn't have welding machines, right? So they would create cold joints in the work that like a arm would kind of fit into a fold in a toga or something, fit inside the drapery, and then it would just be pinned because they didn't have any way of welding it. So they follow a similar thing to that in that they try and cut it in places that it's easier to weld it and put it back together. And also there are just some limitations to how big of a thing you can pour, right? So the pieces wind up being, about this big. Yeah.
To the gentleman who did the filming, was it deliberate not to get a close-up on the, is it the Bostwick house? Not the Bostwick house, but is it okay, not to really do a close-up on the Bostwick house from an artistic standpoint? And if so, why? Because I think the fact that that house is a real travesty, that it's deteriorated to the extent that it is, and there hasn't been any real, interest in restoring it or.
The day that we filmed the exteriors of the Bostwick house, the gate was locked, so we couldn't get onto the property. So we had to stand across the street and get whatever shots we could. And then we also used some still photography that Mike had taken, I think, a year before on a beautiful day. The day that we filmed, it was really gross and humid and hazy and all that sort of stuff. I tried to put blue sky in behind the house, but it was just gray clouds and stuff. So that's why we didn't get a close-up of the house. Yes, it was an artistic choice.
I can further that a little bit in that actually that day they had closed the site because there was a series of storms that year. There was a microburst that came through and then another storm, the derecho, was that year as well, if you all remember those events. And they were actually very concerned for safety of anybody on the site because they weren't sure what was going to happen. The storm that actually that day never happened and it wasn't an issue, but we were left out. And to answer your other question, actually there are a great number of people working on that building. It's just such a colossal mess that it's going to take a very long time to fix it. But the University of Maryland's spending a great deal of time there, and the town is making progress in spite of the fact that the weather has continues to take it apart. So I think those are, but it's been very concerning for many of the people here. The Ammon Trust, Prince George's Heritage, a lot of people have been trying to work with the town to make this thing move forward, and it is slowly. So we're looking forward to its progress, which I think is happening. I have a question for Peter. I mean, after seeing Mark's presentation, which of course has a lot of printed music, and Anthem has got this rich history, printed history about its evolution, and then thinking about the oral tradition, which you're really representing and talking about, I was just kind of wondering, there are cycles of renewal for every art form.
Yes.
Right, and I'm just wondering if you could expand a little bit on as much you can tell me about the renewal and understanding of this oral tradition, this Irish American oral tradition, and a lot of these music that you presented today.
Man, I could sit here and talk about that all day. So it's tricky in terms of Irish traditional music. Let me speak in terms of traditional music as a whole first. I think in the 20th century we've seen 3 or 4 major revivals. The first being when some of you might be familiar with a fellow called Cecil Sharp, who was collecting in the Appalachian Mountains and like the Shenandoah Valley area in particular, who demonstrated that there was a connection between American music and music from the British Isles and Ireland, which we now take for granted, of course, but must have seemed like a real eureka in those days. His revival was in part to try to establish traditional music or folk music, folk song, which he might have called it then, as an expression of the national character of a nation and its people. Later on, the folk revival that we're more familiar with here was to perhaps connect traditional music or folk music with a working class, with a labor movement. But I think what those two revivals did together was, in a way, remove the poverty from traditional music, which was a stigma that in some ways lasts even now, but much less so, I imagine, than it did in the early 20th century. So for me, being able to approach it now, I mean, here I am singing these songs coming to you, and these aren't necessarily songs that we would associate with poverty, but the style in which I'm singing them, I think, very much is. It's a style that would have come from people who lived on farms, or who sang on the street. You know, they weren't making decisions in the government. So in terms of an Irish music revival, Irish music and Irish people who for so long in the 20th century were downplayed as the sort of surplus of labor who were taking jobs from the real Americans, now are having their art form celebrated in its own way and on its own terms, which is that's a real gift to be able to give to any art, in my opinion. So, is that a short answer? I hope. Thank you.
You have a question? No. Anyone else? Yes, sir.
Yes, for Joanna. What was the name of the reenactors who image showed by the Marine and Joshua Barney? What were their names?
Myron Peterson. Oh, sorry. Myron Peterson with Ships Company. Post for Joshua Barney, and Gunnery Sergeant Tom Williams with the U.S. Marine Corps. And he's with their historical division, and he was quite clear that they are not reenactors. They're living history demonstrators. But they do have all of the Marines' uniforms as part of their collection that goes back since the Marines have been around. They've kept records of that.
I can't help saying that if you come to the Philharmonic 1812 concert tonight, you will see Myron Peterson and the Shantymen, who will do an early version of the anthem at the beginning of the concert.
Maybe one more? No?
Yeah,
all right.
I've seen those guys in a pub in Annapolis, and it's a real treat for them all singing together, just sort of, yeah.
So we're almost at time. We are at time. So we thank you very much for sharing your artistry with us today and for your attention, and we'll go on a nice short break now and come back for our final session. Please give a nice round of applause for our artists.